Well, once again, it is a delight to be here today to worship with you and to begin serving as your pastor. The first Sunday for the pastor is sort of a nerve-wracking thing. I'm reminded of the story of the pastor who led worship and preached his first Sunday. And after worship, the pastor stood at the back of the church in the doorway as the line of people filed out. Most were very kind and generous and said good things, except for one man. One man who said, "That was a very dull and boring sermon, Pastor." A few minutes later, the same man came through the line again, and this time said, "I don't think you worked very hard on that message." And a few moments later, again, the man appeared, this time muttering, "You really blew it. That was a terrible first sermon." Finally, the pastor couldn't take it anymore, so he went right to the president of the congregation and asked about the man. "Oh, don't let that guy bother you," said the president. "He's a little slow. All he does is repeat what he hears everyone else say." Hopefully we won't have that problem today. As I begin this morning, there are a few housekeeping details I think I want to tend to. Here are three things that I want you to know about me this morning. One, I want you to know that you can call me Pastor Nathan or just Nathan. When I was a young pastor, younger than I am now, I sometimes went by Pastor Brad because I thought it made me sound older, more distinguished. Alas, my midlife crisis is probably just right around the bend, so I think I want to sound younger now, so Pastor Nathan will do. Which brings us to number two. I want you to know how old I am. I'm 39 years old. Some say I look younger than that. And I won't argue with them. But I will turn 40 next year, and if you look real close, you'll see some gray hairs, which I hope you will count as wisdom. And three, I want you to know that a couple of weeks ago, I weighed 10 pounds less than I do now. At least I think that I did. We haven't yet unpacked the scale to know for sure. But I'm assuming I weighed less before we moved here and you started giving us all this food. Lunches, dinners, homemade cookies, cakes, and jams, Food Lion gift cards, Public gift cards, Chick-fil-A gift cards. I mean, they've got the peach milkshakes at Chick-fil-A right now. Who can resist that? But, the way you have shared food, it has been a blessing. A delicious blessing. Food is a blessing. That's what our gospel story from John shows us. Jesus responds to the need to feed a hungry multitude, and he blesses them with abundance. That's the story I want us to explore together this morning. But first, let me play tour guide for just a moment and tell you what's coming up in the next several weeks. Today is the first Sunday in what will end up being 5 Sundays in the 6th chapter of John. We are in the year of Mark's Gospel, but there's always this period in that lectionary cycle where we get John 6 and Jesus' bread of life discourse. So imagine my delight when I realized my first 5 Sundays at Zion would be more and more and more of John chapter 6. But I've decided to tackle this challenge head on, not preaching on the other readings, not going on vacation, but having us see how What Jesus says and what Jesus does in the 6th chapter of John addresses us, addresses our lives, and the real world problems of people like us. You'll read a little bit more about that in the August newsletter. But for today, here is the problem that Jesus addresses. It's a basic one. Hunger. Hunger. The need for food. And the fear that there may not be enough. And that fear sounds like this. What are they among so many people? What are they among so many people? Say that with me, if you will. What are they among so many people? Those are the words of the disciple Andrew, summing up the fine predicament that he and Jesus and all the disciples find themselves in. Jesus had attracted such a crowd, and they followed Jesus so far up the mountain that finding food is going to be a big problem. There's no store to run off to for supply, and even if there were, it would take 6 months' wages to feed all these people. What are they going to do? Well, thinking fast, Andrew points out that there is a boy there who has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But immediately he offers that disclaimer, what are they among so many people? How could this even make a difference for 5,000? Well, you know how the story goes. Jesus feeds the 5,000. He makes the people sit down in the grass. Then he takes the bread and fish. He pauses to give thanks. And then he distributes the bread and the fish to all. And they have as much as they want. And there are 12 baskets full to spare. It's a miracle. A supernatural use of power to overcome what seems possible. It's a sign. An occurrence that points to who Jesus is and what he is up to. And it's a moment of grace, where people experience the mercy of God. Food is a frequent image of divine mercy in the stories of the Bible. Think how many times food is used to show God's blessing and God's care in the Scriptures. Like when God makes plants and trees in Genesis as food for humanity. Or when the people of Israel received manna in the Exodus during their wandering. Or when God provides food during periods of famine in Old Testament time. Or even God's covenant commands to his faithful people to give their food, to share their food with the hungry and the wandering and the stranger. In the Bible, food is a sign of God's mercy, God's care, God's abundance. And that's certainly the case in our story too. Jesus feeds the people, addresses their hunger, and in meeting their need, he opens their eyes and their hearts to the fact that they are in the presence of holiness and grace. But Jesus also proves Andrew wrong, doesn't he? Those 5 loaves and 2 fish proved to be enough, despite Andrew's lack of faith that they would be worth anything among so many people. It turns out that this bread and fish were plenty, for in the hands of Jesus, what seems small and insignificant can become something large and lasting. In that sense, the story is more than just a story about bread, isn't it? Isn't it also a story about our worries? All our worries that there will not be enough. that in our lives there won't be enough food on the table, enough money to get by, enough time to do everything, enough people to care for us, enough. When honestly do we feel like we have enough? Now, I don't think that the story of Jesus, that the lesson of the feeding of the 5,000 is that Jesus is going to give you more food or more money or more than you need. It's not for such glory that Jesus performs this miracle. But perhaps the comfort we can receive from this gospel story is knowing that it reveals something about Jesus. That he is the one who cares, who shows grace, who does extravagant things, even with very little to work with. The Jesus who longs to be a bigger and bigger part of your life can work even with the small things we have to offer. Our own scraps of bread and fish, whatever those things might be for you, that you would be willing to share. It is enough. There are ways that that's happening here in Zion and through your lives of faith. And I'm interested in hearing about those as we get to know each other more. How is Jesus accomplishing big things through the small things we offer? In what ways are your gifts of food feeding the hungry? How are your offerings sowing the seeds of faithful ministry? Where are your simple prayers making a difference? What are they among so many people? Andrew asked. And we may ask that too. But Jesus has shown us. He fed the multitude that day with a little bread. And he feeds us this day too, with a little bread and wine. It's not much, but in the hands of Jesus, it becomes something large and lasting. And through these means of grace, we are blessed to go and be a blessing to others. Amen.